stop wasting your money in Colorado. If you're coming to Colorado because you think buying a mountain condo is going to turn you into an Airbnb cash flow millionaire, I'm gonna save you a lot of time. You may be absolutely wasting your money. A lot of people come to me as investors first and lifestyle buyers second. The first questions are always the same. Anthony, where can I get the best return? Which town is going to cash flow? How do I keep my expenses down? Which property is going to generate the most rental income? How much equity am I going to gain? These are all completely valid questions, but I've answered them many times on this channel, and we're going to break down the numbers again in this video. But here's the part I want you to understand before we do that. If your main objective is immediate cash flow, Summit County is probably not the best real estate market for you. Let's start with the long-term investment argument. Summit County has something that almost every growing suburban real estate market in the country does not have: a very real limitation on how far it can physically expand. According to county planning documents, roughly 79% of Summit County consists of federal land managed primarily by the United States Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management. Private land makes up a relatively small portion of the county, and much of that private property is concentrated along the valleys and existing transportation corridors, that of which are only 2 or 3 really. That does not mean absolutely nothing new can ever be built. Towns can improve infill projects, property can be rezoned, density can be transferred. There can occasionally be land exchanges, annexations, redevelopment, or workforce housing projects. But Summit County cannot simply sprawl outward endlessly like a Sunbelt suburb. The towns and the county are very intentional about protecting open space, scenic views, natural resources, trails, and the overall character that makes people want to be here in the first place. That creates structural scarcity. Then you combine that scarcity with demand for lifestyle. Summit County is one of the most accessible major mountain regions from Denver. You have Breckenridge, Keystone, Copper Mountain, and Arapahoe Basin right here in the county. Loveland Basin is just over the pass. Vail and Beaver Creek are easy regional day trips. You're not buying access to one ski mountain, you're buying into an entire mountain ecosystem, and skiing is only part of it. People want the Rocky Mountain views, they want to escape the heat in Texas, Florida, Arizona, and other warm markets. They want summer in the mid-70s. They want hiking, mountain biking, fly fishing, paddleboarding, lake days, concerts, camping, snowmobiling, and time outside with their families. That demand has stayed strong because the lifestyle is difficult to reproduce anywhere else. So you have high demand on one side and tightly constrained land on the other. That is the long-term investment thesis. You are owning something in a place where supply cannot easily expand to meet demand. Now, that does not mean prices rise every single year. Real estate does not move in a perfectly straight line. There will be slow years, recessions, interest rate shocks, insurance issues, policy changes, and events nobody can predict. I don't have a crystal ball, and nobody should promise you that a property will appreciate by a specific amount. Wildfire is also a legitimate risk. If a structure is damaged or destroyed, the land remains, but that does not make the investment invincible. The point is not that mountain land has no risk. The point is that scarce, well-located land in a desirable resort market has historically been a much stronger long-term argument than the short-term cash flow on the structure sitting on it. So if you're buying here as an investment, think in terms of 10, 15, 20 years, much like if you were to invest into an index fund that tracks the S&P 500. Do not buy a mountain condo and ask what it is going to do for you over the next 12 months. Ask what owning that location could mean for your family and your balance sheet over the next decade or 2, because the short-term math is not exciting. And I'll break it down for you right now. Say you buy a rentable condo in Breckenridge for $1 million. Already, you're entering at a high purchase price. Properties with desirable short-term rental eligibility and attractive locations are some of the most sought-after units in the market. Breckenridge also now divides short-term rentals into different licensing zones. Some areas have available licenses, while others are capped and have wait lists. That means you cannot assume that every property can legally operate as a short-term rental just because the previous owner rented it or because somebody put an Airbnb projection in the listing presentation. You have to verify the current license status, the zone, whether the license transfers, and whether your ownership plan actually complies with the town or county rules. That regulatory scarcity can support the appeal of eligible rental properties, but it also makes the buying process more complicated. Now, let's say that $1 million condo generates $60,000 per year in gross rental revenue. So $60,000, right? Sounds pretty good until we start subtracting everything. First, you have property management expenses. A full-service property management company in Summit County will commonly charge somewhere around 20% to 30% of rental revenue. Let's use 25% on average. 25% of $60,000 is $15,000. So before we've paid for anything else, your $60,000 becomes $45,000. And as someone who lives here, owns rental property, and has managed rentals himself, I will tell you that paying a good property manager can be worth every penny. Property management, it's not passive. Guests will call you at 5 o'clock in the morning. We'll call you at midnight. The bedroom light bulb won't turn on. An outlet won't work. The toilet's clogged. The dishwasher's making a noise. The window won't open. It won't close. There's a funny smell in the hallway. The neighbor's making too much noise. The hot tub isn't hot enough. Thermostat says 70, but it feels like 68. Really? Seriously? Anything and everything can happen and will eventually happen. And the guests will want someone to solve it immediately. If you live in another state, property management is not your full-time job, and you don't already have contractors and service providers here, I would strongly consider hiring a professional manager. That 25% hurts the spreadsheet, but it may save your sanity. Then you have the HOA. For the type of Summit County condo we're talking about, an HOA payment somewhere around $700 to $1,000 plus per month, it's not unusual. Some are lower, but most are actually higher than that. Some luxury and amenity-heavy properties are significantly higher. I'm talking $2,000 a month and higher. So let's use $900 per month on the conservative end. That's another $10,800 per year. Our $45,000 is now down to $34,200. Then you have insurance, property taxes, utilities that are not covered by the HOA, internet, repairs, and capital expenditures. A refrigerator dies, a water heater fails, a guest breaks a table. And if you want to remain competitive against newer or recently renovated rental inventory, eventually you need to update the kitchen, bathrooms, flooring, furniture, lighting, or all of the above. You also have annual short-term rental licensing and regulatory fees. In Breckenridge, the regulatory fee is currently $756 per bedroom or studio each year, in addition to the annual accommodation unit license fee. There is also a 12.275% combined sales and accommodations tax on lodging in Breckenridge. Now the guest sees the total checkout price. If your rental is $600 per night and then taxes, platform fees, and other charges push the actual price significantly higher, that affects demand and what the market will tolerate. Then there's the one-time cost of purchasing. The town of Breckenridge has a 1% real estate transfer tax paid by the buyer, although it is negotiable, and certainly in a buyer's market like we have right now, it's something you can negotiate on. On a $1 million purchase, that is $10,000 due at closing, subject to any applicable exemptions. That is not a tiny incidental charge. That is $10,000 before you furnish the property, make improvements, or welcome your first guest. After management, HOA dues, insurance, utilities, taxes, licensing, repairs, furnishings, and reserves, it is completely realistic for half or more of that gross rental revenue to disappear before financing. Maybe the property produces $20,000 to $30,000 before debt service and income taxes in a decent year. And then we arrive at the giant elephant in the room, the mortgage. If you put 20% down, you have an $800,000 loan. Depending on your interest rate and loan terms, your annual principal and interest payments alone could approach or exceed the property's entire gross rental revenue. Not the net revenue, the gross revenue. We haven't even talked about the personal days you block off for Christmas, spring break, or summer holidays, which are often the exact dates that would otherwise generate your strongest rental income. Once you add financing, it is very common for an owner to contribute money out of pocket every year. There's no world where that makes sense for someone whose only objective is immediate cash flow. And this is why I don't like people buying Summit County real estate as investors first. Exhibit A, this past season, a new competitor renovates their unit. The family wants to use the condo during the most profitable week of the year, and suddenly the passive income is costing them money. That does not automatically make it a bad purchase. It means it was evaluated using the wrong measurement. If the only reason you're buying is cash flow, there are better real estate markets. Go and find a market where the rent to price ratio actually supports the investment, buy apartments, buy workforce housing, buy in a market where a $300,000 property produces enough rent to comfortably cover the debt and operating expenses. Colorado resort real estate is not built to win that contest. But here's why putting your money into Colorado can still be one of the best decisions that you ever make. Buy it for the lifestyle. Buy it because you're a mountain person. Buy it because you love skiing or just simply looking at the Rocky Mountains. Buy it because you want your kids to grow up associating the mountains. Buy it because you want a return on life. Summit County consistently ranks among the longest lived communities in the country. The exact life expectancy estimate changes depending on the data set and the methodology. Older peer-reviewed research placed Summit County around 86.8 years, while more recent national community rankings have it estimated in the low 90s. Now, the current United States average is about 79 years. Buying a condo in Breckenridge does not guarantee that you're going to live an extra 10 or 15 years. I can't put that in the contract, and the title company is not going to insure it. But the broader point is undeniable. This community encourages movement. It encourages activity. It surrounds you with people who continue doing difficult, exciting things well into their 60s, 70s, and even 80s. I recently went on a mountain bike excursion with a local riding group here in Summit County. The average age was probably around 60 to 62. There were riders in their 50s, their 60s, and even their 70s. And I know there are some riders in their 80s who join frequently as well. And we were not cruising casually down some paved recreation path, although the recreation path is great. We were at the Keystone Downhill Bike Park, which is notorious for being one of the gnarliest downhill bike parks around. If you know, you know. And these guys in their 60s and 70s were shredding, like shredding. They were almost as fast as me. Some of them probably roar faster than me, whether I want to admit that publicly or not. We probably did about 10 to 15 miles of combined downhill riding that day. And it was an intense day. Again, not your mellow afternoon spin. And watching people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s riding that type of terrain was one of the most inspirational things I have ever seen. It was a perfect example of what this environment and this community can bring out of people. One of the riders told me his story, and he had moved here from out of state, decided to try mountain biking because it seemed like something fun to do. On his first ride, he had to get off and walk his bike up hills that most regular local riders would consider relatively minor. And he started thinking, I'm in my 50s. Is this really the time to start mountain biking? Is this what it feels like? Maybe this isn't for me. But he tried again. I know most of you in your 50s, you're like, why in the hell would you do that? I believe he eventually worked with a coach or somebody who helped him learn the fundamentals, more or less, build fitness, and he gained confidence. Fast forward a few years, and he was one of the gentlemen shredding down Keystone with me. He went from thinking, I'm 55 years old, and maybe I'm too old to begin, to being in his 60s and riding like an absolute beast. That's the culture here. When I go back to the East Coast to visit family, I see a very different mentality in some people. My family is generally pretty healthy, so I'm not talking about them specifically, but I see plenty of people in their 60s and 70s who have mentally decided their active years are finished. They've been sedentary for years. Maybe they've consumed too much alcohol, eaten poorly, stopped challenging their bodies, and built their lives around sitting inside. Then their physical limitations reinforce their mental limitations, and they assume they can't do anything anymore. Out here, you're surrounded by people who refuse to accept that as reality. They're calling their friends and asking, what are we doing on a Tuesday? When everybody else is working or retired and sitting on their couch, they're out living life to the fullest. That community changes your perception of what aging can look like. So if you want to talk about return on investment, how much would you pay for more active years with your spouse? How much would you pay to still ski with your kids when they're adults? How much would you pay to ride a bike with your grandchild? How much would you pay to have a home where your family actually gathers instead of repeatedly saying, we should all plan a trip sometime? Side note, since we moved out here, we've gained about 40 new best friends from all different parts of the country because they all just want to come and visit us here in the mountains. I think that speaks volumes. There is no spreadsheet sell for that. That's why I want people to buy here lifestyle first. The rental income is absolutely useful. It can offset expenses. It can reduce the annual cost of ownership. It can help you justify holding a property long-term, but it should not be the entire reason the purchase works. Long-term appreciation should be treated as potential, not a guarantee. Rental income should be treated as an offset, not a guaranteed profit center. And the lifestyle should be valuable enough that you would still be happy owning the home during a flat market, a weak rental year, or a year where expenses are higher than expected. That is the test. Would your family still be glad you own this property if it did not cash flow this year? Would you still come here? Would you still use it? Would you still build memories here? The answer is no, don't buy it. You're wasting your money. But if the answer is yes, you are going to spend extended periods here, use the trails, ski the mountains, host your family, escape the summer heat, become part of the community, and hold the property for long term. Then the investment begins to look completely different. So my advice is straightforward. Do not buy in Summit County because somebody showed you an aggressive rental projection. Do not buy because you think prices are guaranteed to double. Do not buy because you heard owning an Airbnb is passive income. Bullcrap. Buy because you understand the carrying costs, can comfortably afford the property, believe in the location over the long term, and want the lifestyle badly enough to actually use it. But if you want a return on life, if you want to live as fully as possible, spend more time outside, create family traditions, and be surrounded by people who are still shredding in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, I will put Summit County up against just about anywhere. So call, text, or email me. My name is Anthony Soul with Live Sotheby's International Realty. We'll run the real numbers. We'll look at the rental rules, management costs, HOA health, insurance, financing, current revenue history, and long-term ownership profile. But before we do any of that, I'm going to ask you the most important question. If this property never becomes an amazing short-term cash flow investment, will owning it still make your family's life better? Because if the answer is yes, you may not be wasting your money at all. Thank you guys so much for watching this week's video, and I'll see you in the next one.